Every couple of years, it seems that there's some news article or book claiming that a new discovery, a newly translated papyrus scroll, is one of the lost books of the Bible. But here's the truth. They just plain aren't. The Bible is made up of the books that the church found useful and passed around. We have no gaps in time from the early church all the way through to today. There is no time when a book of the Bible that people really considered canon could be lost. You can't lose something that was in wide circulation. That's like saying that somehow we lost Wikipedia. How would you lose Wikipedia? Everyone's using it. In the early stages of canon development, there were several books that almost made it into the New Testament. First Clement, Shepherd of Hermas, Epistle of Barnabas, Apocalypse of Peter, things like that. But we know what those books are, at least by their name. When people talk about the lost scriptures, they're almost invariably talking about some new discovery that we never heard of before. And if we've never heard of this before, and if no early church mother or father wrote about it or quoted it, then we know for a fact that it could not have been something that was widely passed around and almost made it into scripture. We have a lot of Christian writers from the 1st and 2nd century, and they quote books of the Bible regularly, especially the Gospels and some of Paul's writings. We know what books they used all the time, and we know what books they relied on, and all of the books that they relied on made it into the Bible because they were useful and they spread them widely. There was no chance for a book of the Bible to get lost. The closest that we can get to a lost book of the Bible is the Apocrypha, and that has been in continuous use this entire time. Protestants have just forgotten about it. So how can they make that claim? The books that made it into the New Testament were written in the 1st century CE, but that doesn't mean that the earliest surviving manuscripts we have of those books come from the 1st century. They normally come from the 3rd, 4th, or 5th century, and that is the time period where all of these lost books of the Bible come from. So because they were written in an era where we have our earliest surviving manuscripts, and they come from a time before the canon was officially settled in 397, some people make the claim that they were part of the Bible that got cut. Sure, they might have been read, but actually believed and passed down and considered canon? No, they never were. Not by the church as a whole. Here's kind of a modern analogy to what's going on. Let's say in 1,000 years, archaeologists dig up a dumpster from behind an old Goodwill. Okay? And in it, they find dozens upon dozens of copies of the Left Behind series. And they say, oh my word, we have discovered lost scriptures from the early 21st century. And we say, no. Some Christians did read those books, yes, but they were discarded quite quickly because people realized that they weren't true and were ridiculously unhelpful. Just because some Christians read something or it passed around for a short period of time does not mean that anyone considered them part of the Bible. References to the lost books of the Bible are almost always references to books that never had a prayer of making it into the Bible, which is really strange because there legitimately were books that almost made it into the canon in some places, though they didn't have universal enough appeal or historicity to finally make it in and were eventually set aside by the church. Don't be fooled by catchy marketing gimmicks and titles. We can learn a great deal from these non-canonical books because there's an amazing amount that even though they never made it into scripture, we have managed to absorb into our theology and practice, especially around the time of Christmas. They are worth a look, but as soon as you start reading them, you will know why they didn't make it into the Bible. At best, these books were used as secondary sources by particular groups scattered around the known world, not by the Church Universal, and not as a primary source ever. So, I hope that's helped a little bit. As always, thank you for watching. See you next video.